today we have Scott Lord, and if you don't know Scott, like many in the production crew, you either never see them or you see the backs of them. And I've been privileged. I've been playing kind of a new producer role, and Scott and I have spent a good amount of time sitting next to each other, except we've got our headsets on, don't we? Don't we, Scott?
This is true. Yeah. We sit next to each other and we talk over a headset.
That's right. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like families these days. They sit in the same room and they just text each other.
Exactly.
So I'm thankful Scott was willing to take one of these interviews because I've enjoyed interacting with Scott, and now you guys get to know who Scott Lord is. So. All right, Scott, we're going to just kind of let you take off here on just telling us a little bit about yourself, maybe where you were born and raised, a little bit about your family. How did you end up at Pleasant Valley when you came? Yeah, just unpack for us who Scott Lord is.
Oh, okay. Well, I was born in Cornish, New Hampshire. So I started up north and then ended up moving to just outside of DC to finish up high school. And that's where I met my wife, and she grew up in Chillicothe. So when we talked about getting married and talked about having kids, we said we didn't want to do it just outside of DC.
Yeah.
And she said New Hampshire was too cold, there was too much snow. So I traveled to the Midwest, had never been here before. Discovering tornadoes was quite an interesting fact.
Yeah, they probably don't have not many tornadoes up in New Hampshire, huh?
Not at all. And sirens would go off and people would be like, yeah, we probably ought to go downstairs. Yeah, that one, it's probably not going to be close. And I'm like, how can you be so relaxed? I'm freaking out. So,
hey, listen, I understand. I won't tell you the story now, but growing up, my childhood home was hit by a tornado. And we had to actually move out of it for a whole year. So I'll tell you that story another time. But yeah, I'm a little
absolutely.
I'm a little terrified of tornadoes. So
so we ended up moving up here due to my job. We'd started in Springfield and then moved up here due to my job in '97. And it was actually some friends of my wife's who got us plugged in at Pleasant Valley. So when we came up, we were fortunate to have her aunt, who was a real estate agent, help find us a place to live up here. And through friends, we got plugged into Pleasant Valley. So
that's awesome. So I did. Now, when you said you had some of the friend connection there, did they just invite you? What was your first connection at Pleasant Valley? Was it like a worship service? Was it a production that they did, or what?
Yeah, it was a worship service because I was, to be honest, a very new Baptist. I was raised Catholic, and after being raised Catholic, decided that I didn't need to go to church every day. And so my wife was raised Baptist. Her father was a Baptist minister, and we got plugged into a church in Springfield. And frankly, when I found out that I was going to be a dad, and realized that I couldn't find any rule books out there, and looked for everything I possibly could on how to be a father. And most of the authors I found and wrote said, here's the first place you need to be. And they were always relating back to the Bible and the one true Father. And so I'd say that God has put people in my life and put situations in my life to just turn me there, regardless of whether I wanted to go. So when we came here, we wanted to be able to get plugged in, and we knew Gary Venable and Jan, and so they invited us to come to a worship service at Pleasant Valley.
Yeah,
and that was in the first building, and you want to talk about being overwhelmed. Oh my goodness. So
unpack that a little bit. What made it so overwhelming that first time?
Well, for me, it was two things. Number one, it was like packed to the gills. I mean, it looked like a concert,
Mhm.
not a worship service. It kind of sounded like a concert and not a worship service. Um, so with a big band and a big stage and
Right.
um,
If you're used to mass, you're doing the Kyrie, and I mean, you're like, it's very different. It's a very different experience. So
yeah, yeah. The First Baptist church that I went to, the first thing I looked is I was like, "There's no place to kneel," and I didn't understand why that was. Um, so the
that's
worship experience
awesome.
is quite different.
That's so awesome to hear you say that. Well, a lot of people don't know that. Well, if you're new to Pleasant Valley, maybe you don't know that Merle Meese actually has a Catholic background. He was born and raised Catholic,
Oh,
and
I
so
did not know that. Yeah.
you should ask him about it, because he totally. I mean, he gets it. He understands it. And I'll say, you're not the only one. You're not the only one that came from a Catholic background. So I've done some other interviews already, and you're not alone.
Yeah. So it's been fun, and coming to Pleasant Valley when we were in that small space. While it was overwhelming for me, that was kind of nice. It was like, well, I can kind of sit here and I'll meet a few people, but you can be anonymous. Um, you know, for mass when you went every Sunday and you pretty much had the same people you went with, and everybody knew everybody. I mean, my town had less than 2,000 people in it, so um,
Wow.
you know, everybody knew who you are, and I wasn't quite sure um, what I was gonna like or dislike with Pleasant Valley, or even if I wanted to be plugged in. So I was like, well, at least it's big enough where I can be anonymous, and we kind of decide what I want to do from there. Um,
Well, and that's a great place for some people to start. Some people don't want to come and be like, man, I'm like one of a couple of people, and everyone's going to know me, and they're going to ask me a bunch of questions. Sometimes it's nice to just, hey, let me come and be one of the crowd, and figure some stuff out here. So that can be a really good thing. I know you said you came in '97, right?
mhm.
So what point did Pleasant Valley move from I think it's like the Shoal Creek building into the new building? What year was that?
That was in 99,
Okay, so you
early 2000. Yep.
so you had 2 or 3 years in that old building where you were jam packed in there like sardines.
Yes. Yeah, we most certainly were. So um, it was interesting because just like we talk about today at Pleasant Valley, yeah, it might be a big church, but it's about the community. It's about the uh, like-minded people that you end up gravitating to, whether it's in a Bible study, whether it's in how you serve or where you serve. There was just a great opportunity for people to connect, and we were able to do that. And in moving to the big church, there were a lot of needs. I think I shared with you a little bit of
Yep.
our first service where we had all three services come in and we didn't even fill the entire front. And when Pastor Vernon had said, God gave us this space and we're going to fill it. And I looked around and went, gee, probably not. So it's a pretty big task. But it was such a beautiful building, but it was very, you definitely were praying of, I don't know how we're going to fill this, how do we make this happen? But God's provided up to this point, and we have to trust that he'll do it again.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
I think every church is in an interesting situation right now, where middle of pandemic, and not everyone feels comfortable physically showing up in the church. So it's really questioning, okay, what is the church? We say it's not a building. We've said
mhm,
that before, and so it's just going to be interesting to watch all of this play out mid-pandemic and post-pandemic. So
mhm. It is, and it's nice to actually see that we're seeing more and more people that are feeling more comfortable to come back to worship. At least I've noticed that over the last few weeks,
yeah.
um, which is nice. And you know, I think we all have probably become professionals on Zoom meetings and Google Meets and Hangouts and all that stuff that I didn't know anything about in the pandemic. Um, you know, I
Yep.
might be in an industry where I sell technology, but I was like, I have no need to talk to somebody face to face. If I, make a phone call or you go meet with them,
Right.
that's,
Well, why would you? I mean, no one really had specific reason to be forced to do so, and then all of a sudden, when you have to make stuff happen and you want to see people, you just use the best technology that you can. So,
Mhm.
hey, okay. So, are you okay if we move on to question number two here?
Yes.
If I ask you, okay. So, question number two was if you'd be willing to share something that most people don't know about you. So, um, what what could you share that when you run into other people are going to be like, oh, I did not know that about Scott Lord. So,
Hmm.
what would you share? What do most people don't know about you?
Um, Probably kind of what I do outside the church. I mean, my career, I think I'm known on that, but I work with a nonprofit organization called Partner Alliance for Safer Schools. We started that back in 2014, and I was one of the 4 charter members of it. Or let's say the 4 volunteers that were, back then we called it stupid enough to try this and see what would happen. Uh,
We we like we like to refer to that as being a mushroom eater. Like you don't know which ones are poisonous. You're on the cutting edge, so
yeah.
you might get poisoned. It might just taste good and discover something new. So yeah, so you're innovating that by being one of the charter members.
So we put that together just because I've always had a passion of kind of keeping our schools safe ever since, um, well, really ever since I've had kids, even before we had events that brought it to light. And kind of working in the security industry, we all kind of had that feeling of, well, it'll never happen here. And then when it started happening, schools were doing everything they could to put technology in with no understanding on how to do it.
Mm.
And with my background is in fire science. And so I like reading codes and all the stuff that people make them go to sleep at night. I like to sit up at night and decide how we change the code. How do we make it better? And
You actually enjoy reading the fine print of how all of the fire stuff works.
yes. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they call us code geeks, and so when somebody has a question, I'll get a call because they know I love to dive into it.
That is fascinating. I mean, someone has to know like all that code stuff. So how did you get started with the school safety aspect of it?
We ended up. I've got a good friend of mine, Chuck, who basically just we were at a security conference, and he said, "Hey, I've been invited to this basically roundtable meeting for people to talk about what we wanted about how we can secure schools, both K through 12 and higher ed." And so we went to that, and it looked like something that would be interesting. However, they would have a monthly call where it was just something new to be put on the table with no traction. And there was another gentleman who was kind of asking the same questions I was, like, okay, what's our agenda? What's our next step? What are we going to do? What are we going to bring to the table next month?
Hmm.
And so Jim Crumbly and I connected, and he said, you know what? I've got a school that's going, or a district that's going through this right now, and that I'm helping them as a security consultant. And, we think we're doing the right things, but we're not sure. And so he pretty much just sent out an email and said, the people who actually really want to show up to this show up. And so about 10 or 12 of us went to Atlanta, Georgia, and spent 3 days hammering out what we were going to do, when we were going to get it done. And Jim and Chuck and I and the regional manager from HID, I kind of sat down that evening and said, well, let's put some structure to this. We actually were able to secure funding through some of the organizations that our companies worked with, so we could at least get it started, to be able to publish and produce and get a website and everything else. And then Jim and I wrote
Awesome.
we wrote the first version of the guidelines of just an easy way for schools to be able to look at a tiered approach on how to bring technology into their schools. They could do it, in a big type of swath if they had that funding, or how they could do it just, year to year.
Incrementally. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, my lights went out down here. I'm in my basement this morning. What I'm not telling people is Scott picked a very early morning time here, so I I rolled out of bed to have this interview with Scott and I here. So, and then in my basements here, I got lights that go out automatically. So that's really fun. So if I had you, you would probably be more technology savvy than I would be, and you would actually be able to change that timer so it doesn't go off after a certain amount of time.
Well,
I,
of
I, I
course.
should I should have called you for my basement safety plan.
There you go. So you probably got a way to probably schedule it.
Yes, but alas, I'm a musician, so I just fake like I know what I'm doing. So, well, that's awesome. So really, like you kind of were entrepreneurish to launch something brand new. Not a lot of people do that. A lot of people go to work for a company. It's already established. Everything has already been in motion. But to start something brand new, I mean, that's kind of a unique. Not a lot of people have that. There are some, but not everyone has that entrepreneurial type of an experience like you had.
Yeah, it's definitely an experience. Our first couple of years, we honestly didn't know if we would be able to get traction or not. And now, uh, to be honest, it's a lot like my experience at Pleasant Valley. I kind of get to sit back and watch others kind of take over the lion's share of stuff. We're on our fifth revision, and I'm not writing it all. I am putting it all together and helping wordsmith it. But then we have an entire team that is actually produces the document and gets it up on our website. And so it's really, really fun to
That's
see that.
awesome. That's fun. Almost like seeing a baby grow up a little bit.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, it really is, because you kind of you put your heart and soul in there, and and you're not sure, how
Yep.
it's all gonna work out. And having 5 kids of my own, and the last two are in high school. Um it's amazing to watch them and how they grow, and kind of how they take off, and that first time they get out the door is you know the time that I'm definitely on my knees going, oh, he's not
Yep.
going to make it,
Th-
or
yeah.
this, I'm not ready for this. Or my wife's like, are you sure this is a good idea? I'm like, no, but they're moving out anyway. um
Yep. You have no choice but to allow babies to grow up and to send them out on their own and be independent. And it goes for businesses.
Mhm.
That works on a spiritual front with people, and it works for our own kids. I mean, at some point, at some point you've been the best steward you can, and you release it to them. So that's hard. I'm not there yet, but when I do get there, maybe we'll just drop ours off at your house and you can show us how it's done.
Well, I'm not sure that I'm a good role model on it. My oldest daughter and I like to say, you did a good job despite all the how hard you tried.
Yeah. Hey, sometimes you do the best you can do. Oh. Hey Scott, so I'm kind of ending all these interviews by asking how we can be praying for people. So if you could share something that the creative arts community at Pleasant Valley could just be praying for you about in the coming weeks or months, what's something that you could share that we could be praying about?
Yeah, I mean, just praying for our family, and you know, God's blessed us pretty well as far as everyone being safe and COVID free. But my oldest daughter works in the medical industry, so there's always a potential there. And um, my son and wife work in industries that, they have to interact with a lot of people, and just, just kind of pray that we stay healthy, and pray also for my younger son who starts college this year. So he will start next week with his hybrid classes of online and on campus. So we're excited about that. But again, it's kind of one of those where, sort of kind of getting out of the house, but not really. So,
Yep.
but he's
What a way to start college. You pick a pandemic year to launch into that.
Yeah, I tell you, it's been amazing seeing these kids. Especially with the difficulties of, not having those senior things that you normally do in high school. And so watching how these kids kind of figured that out, whether it was through, medium like Zoom, or ways that they could kind of figure out how to get together, without actually physically having to get together. So that it's, if there's any kids that, who graduated this year, if you want to talk about, how to go from young adult to real adult experiences, these kids have gotten it, and they've really knocked it out of the park. I mean, it's been pretty impressive what these kids have done.
That's awesome. Well, we'll definitely be praying for health, safety for the Lord family, and especially for your son as he's kind of starting into college. And before I let you go, I just want to let you know we appreciate what you do. A lot of people don't see the person running lights, but they see your work all the time. And a lot of people have no clue. Hey, it takes time to program these. You don't just sit down and press an on button. That's not how this works.
Yeah,
this
is true.
Yeah, you've got intelligent lighting, XYZ axis, I believe, and then you've got the intensity of the light, and then all kinds of kelvins with temperature of what the lighting can be, and then the color spectrum. It's just, there's a lot that goes into it, and then you're the hazer. We call you the hazer man.
This is true.
I'm just kidding. I should probably explain. Haze is what we put in the air. It allows you to see the beams of light, and actually, it's like painting with technological stained glass, which I love. It's great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So yeah, and I enjoy being behind the scenes. The only time that they know when you're there is usually when the lights go out, because they don't like to sing in the dark, and Pastor Merle doesn't like preaching in the dark. So
I know, wouldn't be fun. We've done it a couple of times. I think the power has gone out and we didn't have a choice, but that's probably not what we would prefer, though.
This is true.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Scott.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. You have a great day.
All right. Thanks for joining us today for this interview, and stay tuned for some more interviews coming up in the future.